I've told this story at least once before on the podcast, if not multiple times, but it is a foundational part of Philip and my relationship, so it ties directly into our topic for today. We've covered the 5 levels of mastery in a previous episode, and this is one of the first things that Philip taught me back in the mid-90s. And as I have gotten to know his 2 sons, Garrett and Parker, very well, one of the things the 3 of us joke about is Philip sharing the 5 levels of mastery with us over and over and over and over. Now, normally, as one ages, you start to forget the stories you have told. With Philip, this has been since the minute I met him, and Philip was my age, his early 40s, mid 40s when we met. And so this has constantly been a part of our relationship.
Soon to be 63 now, so you can, yep, I get the age bit. We can't hide from it. Keep going.
And you haven't gotten any worse. You're still exactly the same. So, you keep doing, you're doing well, Cy. You're doing well.
One of my paradigms or models is the mother of all learning is repetition. So keep going.
Right. So we always get, have I shared with you the 5 levels of mastery? And we all, of course, joke and have a good time with it. But it started me thinking about the fact that the reason why Philip does this is that I start to think about the things he's taught me, and I think, do I have that right? What are the 4 things you have to do to be a senior level manager? I was thinking about this the other night as I was preparing for this episode, and so, Philip, I'm going to see if I can recall now the 4 things. This is one of the things that I've heard you time and time again relate. So I'm going to see if I can recall. Number 1, you have to do a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, you have to take over an existing business that is functioning well and keep it running. Number 3 is you have to take over an existing business and run it into the ground. And then number 4 is you have to manage both staff and line employees, so management and then frontline workers. How did I do?
Well, you got 3 out of 4 for 75% correct. Number 3, that's the power of 3, right? We've always liked the power of 3. Taking over a business and running into the ground. No, they CFOs generally don't like that. You got to knock on the door rather quickly. You got to take over a failing business and make and turn and right the ship.
Okay, so I'm merging 2 bits of wisdom that you learn a lot from failures.
Absolutely correct.
Okay. So I'm not I listen a little.
Well, you do. Well, everyone, that's the challenge. We're being bombarded every day. We'll talk more about this in the article review, but I just read, there's 35,000 decisions where a person makes each day. Now they could be small, starting off, okay, when am I going to wake up? What am I going to have for breakfast? What, do I want cream in my coffee today? And, it's amazing. So if you can just start making 1 or 2 decisions more effective, better, you'll start turning your life around, because we've said this before. There's 3 things to sustain optimal performance, and it's talent, skills, and decision making. And decision making is 2 times more powerful than talent and skills. Talent's what you're born with. You're good at math, good at music, whatever. Skills are developed over a lifetime. So that decision making is huge.
Right. So we are episode 31 of the Valuability Podcast. Now it's going to be a little bit of a clickbait title, How to Run a Business into the Ground. And in reality, it's how to take a business out of the ground. we will stay with that clickbaity title for the time being, making it even more humorous that I got it wrong. So the Valuability Podcast is for financial professionals, business owners, and anyone interested in financial planning, business leadership, and personal development. We believe that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. Last week, we had mentioned that we were going to have on two of the leadership team from Income Lab, a software company in the financial services sector. They had a last-minute scheduling conflict, so we had to reschedule them, but we are looking at scheduling them hopefully for either next week or very soon. And we're excited to double back and touch base with them. So my name is Danforth Fleek. I was a financial advisor and product wholesaler for 20 years in the financial services industry. I'm joined each week by my co-host, friend, mentor, and repeater of wisdoms, Philip Simonson. Philip was in financial services for over 40 years as an advisor, a field leader, sales trainer, and obviously senior manager with a wide range of responsibilities such as advisor development and field operations. Now, going back to the 5 levels of mastery, is it possible? I mean, I think I know the answer is yes, that you just can't get mastery over some things, no matter how hard you try. The topic, of course, that I'm asking about is the construction equipment. I keep wanting to call it a backhoe, and I know it's not a backhoe. What is this
you are
thing?
on fire today, aren't you? Boy, that's a great example. I don't have enough hours. Mastery takes 10,000 hours. But yes, I did break the backhoe once again.
This is the third time, correct?
Third time, and my buddy Don says I'm fired. I'm not even gonna. He's 85. He still flies his plane every day. If the weather's nice, he's just got a brilliant mind. More mechanical, more the engineering. He doesn't suffer fools gladly either. So I've been fired. So in that sense, Dan, I'll never master the excavator.
Excavator, that's what it is. I kept saying, like, is it a backhoe? I wanted, is it a skid loader? I couldn't remember
the big
what.
bucket in the front and with a blade.
Yep.
And
Yep. No, all right. Well, good stuff. I had to ask, but to be fair, I think there are simulators for excavators, but you just don't have access to.
Yeah. Well, then maybe that's where I'll obtain mastery. But
Right.
there's another wisdom you said, and that is just applied knowledge. And one thing, we're going to have fun in this episode, but just share a bunch of learnings. But here's another learning. You can be sure those who love you know exactly which emotional triggers to push. Dan, you've been pushing them for the last half hour now since we've been on. So that's
All right, we'll move on. I'll stop hassling you. You can find the Valuability Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And we also have a YouTube channel. You can search Value-Ability on YouTube to find us there. Of course, you can find us on our website, value-ability.com. Click on the episodes tab, and all of our past episodes are there. Wherever you find us, please like, review, subscribe, and share. Of course, sharing right now is the best thing you can do with us. If you enjoy our content, let other people know. It is very, very, very much appreciated. And lastly, if you want to connect with us, our email is info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com. Or you can reach out to us via social media. You can find our Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook links at value-ability.com. Click on the Contact Us tab, and all of our social media links are there. So when we had the cancellation yesterday, immediately I go into, okay, we got to record an episode. We got to pick something that we know, something out of our experience, something that we don't have to do a ton of prep time for. And one of the things that occurred to me was the fact that we have outside of the United States, our number one listenership area is the United Kingdom. Right now, it's about 10% of our overall listenership is over there, and a large part of that is likely due to the fact that you spent 5 years over there and had a number of professional relationships, and a couple of the people that helped us out in our initial focus group as we were building the podcast were people who are still over there. Plus, we've added some on Twitter. Twitter has a very strong financial services community in the United Kingdom. And so we have a number of Twitter followers as well, who I would guess are also listeners. And so it's just started me thinking about your experiences over there. And I know that you have mentioned multiple times that it was one of the business experiences that you got the most learnings from. And so I just thought that we could go through that and learn a little bit about that experience. And also, I know there are a ton of great stories over the years, including your run-in, shall we say, with royalty, which we have to cover at some point.
Oh, yes. You're making a lot of news right now.
Yes.
Yes, you're right. Maybe we'll fit that in. Perfect. That's good. No, Dan, nice segue, and it was a great experience, not just on learnings from how to run a business and not run a business, but also just personally. I made wonderful friends over there, and if you know, if you ever get anyone, it's rare for only a certain amount of people. Very few people get an expat ability, but if you ever get a chance, I'd highly recommend it. It's great to know and learn other people's culture. It opens up you. It opens up your mind. We're more, and I always said, I'm more of a world citizen uh, versus, uh, well, there's that another story remind me, if we have time to tell you, is uh, there was an expat who sat and bitched. I'll just say it now. Bitch, bitch, bitch. Nothing was right. They don't have ice in the water. They don't, everything is much slower around here. And, nothing can be right. Well, we had a 5, 4, and 1 month old when we moved over there. So, you can imagine Lisa, she didn't have her green card. So, only I had the green card so I could work. And so she was staying home with 3 children. Our house was gazumped. I found that out the day before we were to leave. And gazumped just means it falls through. And I said, how can it fall through? We leased it. I signed everything. I went over ahead of time and was all excited. No, you no longer have that place. You'll have to find a new place when you come. So we're in a hotel, and then we rent apartment, and well, we finally, one of these Americans says, let's go out. We'll take you out to dinner. We got a babysitter, and we'll go to a play, and then we'll go out for dinner afterwards. Yeah, it's great. We'll go to the West End. Love it. Love theater. All I heard was bitching, bitching, bitching. So I got up from the table. I went and paid the bill, and I came back. Lise, I think it's time for us to leave. Here's what I do know. We're here to enjoy this experience in this culture. And last time I checked, there's around 59 million people living in this country. Something's got to be right and going right. I'm looking for that. I'm not looking for what's going wrong here. So we got up and left. I saw their jaws drop, and hence I laid my mark down right away.
It's true, though. There's, in any experience, you look around, and I one of my first experiences of this was going to camp in 1983. I was terribly homesick, just didn't want to go, wasn't interested in going. And then, of course, I get there and I have just a great 3 weeks, and you could go for either 3, 6, or 9 weeks. And when I came time for me to go home, I, called, Mom, can I stay another 6 weeks? And she's
Yeah.
like, I couldn't chisel you out of here on your way out, right? And my mom, being the consummate teacher she was, of course, used that and said, you remember this now when you
Hmm.
get into situations where you think you don't want to do something, always just go do it. And the worst case scenario is you find out you don't like it.
Right.
And right. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it was interesting though, because with travel, we ended up in England when I was 5. So it's interesting that
Both of us were there.
Spencer was the same age as me when I
Yes.
went over, and we only stayed for 2 years. But in fact, when my dad stopped moving, I was really bummed. That was our last, overseas trip with the military. Was ended when I was 7, and I remember distinctly thinking, "Oh, we're not going to get to go any cool places anymore." So yeah, it interesting that side of me, I was interested in doing it, but then, more, it really was the social side, I think, for me with camp, was that it was a bunch of people I didn't know,
Right.
as opposed to being a place that I didn't know. So, but I think you're spot on. Like, you can sit around and complain about what's different, or you can go out and find what's good and fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So segue back now to the look. If you're going, let me start by saying this: there's two ways to make a living in the world. You can either orchestrate your own talents and resources to achieve what it is you want for yourself, or, and that's being a sole proprietor. Independent contractor, or you can orchestrate your own other people's talents and resources to help them achieve what it is they want for themselves. And that latter is you're going to go into leadership and management. And if you're going to play the corporate game, and if you want to rise in the corporate world, we said there's those four things that you've got to master and have experience and successful experience of running a startup, taking over a failing organization, running both line and staff, and running a large organization. Well, before I went to England, I went down to Dallas, Texas, and co-ran a region with a great mentor of mine, since passed away, Jim. And when we went when I went down there was 13 regions for this company. Um, it was a part of American Express, when it was the old IDS, and then it became American Express Financial Services. And we were 12th out of 13 in the CEO's Harvey's scorecard. And let me tell you, 12th wasn't the best; it was close to the bottom. And 2.5 years later, we had it up to number one. And it definitely was a team effort. There is no doubt about that. But I remember Jeff Stiefler, Jeff and Harvey ended up sending me over along with Jim to England. But when I went up, and I was one of the youngest probably regional director, Jim said, just when I went up to the home headquarters, look, and we're going to have a meeting with Jeff, who ended up becoming the CEO of American Express Financial Services and CEO of American Express. He said, remember, they put their pants on like you do, one leg at a time. So we're there, and we're going to have lunch with Jeff, and Jeff's going to read us the scorecard. Well, he starts off with division 71. No, it was 77. Excuse me. He says, and I'm not in the front, when I'm in the back, and he says, Philip. And I was, well, he even knows my name. Okay. Bump. I bet his handicap's getting lower. I go, oh, this isn't good. I'm not a real good golfer, but I know I know what the message is here. And so I said, okay, he's going to take me to school. I'm going to learn how how they measure things, because things that generally get measured are generally get achieved, and things that, and I've learned too, things that, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So let's just say, fast forward, we finished lunch. He taught me, I had massive learnings on how to run that scorecard and what are the key behaviors that drive these, the results.
So he was drilling down into specific advisors,
Oh, the districts, yeah. So
right?
first, we had the region, and then we had 12 divisions, and then like 54 districts. So this is, from the macro to the micro.
Right.
So okay, I'm in the elevator going in with Jeff. We're finished. It was, and I looked at him, and this is a question I always used. We would only stay in a position, initially I was fast tracking 2.5, 3 years, and we were moving again. And I said, anytime I took over a new position, I would ask the leader, I said, look, if we're sitting down 3 years from today or next year at this time, and you said we've had a successful relationship, or I've hit the ball out of the park here, hit a home run, or, what must happen in order for that to occur? So I asked Jeff that question, and I can't, I won't say exactly what he said, but Philip, he looked at me, and you got to know, no, he
Different
says,
time.
it's a different time. This is what this been? This has been
Like
late
89,
80s.
90.
Yeah,
Yeah.
80. Yeah, probably 87. He said, "Look, I better in 2.5 years, the max 3, have to come in, grab you, and take you out of there because you're in their faces so much, and I'm getting calls from, will you get this bugger out of here? Because all he's doing is, hounding me and yada yada yada." I said, "Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the style I want, And I went back to Jim, who's a consummate team player, and but Jeff had his point. Things that are generally are, people do what you inspect, not what you expect. So I said, all right, my first meeting, do the math. Now Harvey said, the quickest way to change people's behavior is get in their back pocketbook, right? Two, he also had the first job of a leader is to define current reality in a non-obscure way. Most people, because of our egos, and that's why you can't go from to the fourth or fifth step. You can't even get to the third step of mastery. And is because your pride gets in the way. Just do as you're told, identify gaps, and seek help. People won't seek help because their pride. So I said, all right, because most people say with an over assess their readiness and say they're actually better than what they than what they are. And then, so if you got a vertical axis, horizontal axis, and you draw a line, people, going across the vertical, to the far right hand side, you see on the horizontal, and hey, that's where they say they are. And then you draw a line underneath it, and the difference in between is pain and growth. And you got to share actual observations or facts to let them know that's why they're not really there. And I can get you there, but here's what we got to start doing. So I have this first meeting, and Harvey, in those days, days, you just recruit, and throw it up against the wall. And if it sticks, great. And if it doesn't, you know what? I'm going to get their leads afterwards, or I'll take over their family members' accounts. So there was the divisional managers. There was no cost to them if whether or not this person actually succeeded or not. So Harvey changed that and said, "You're going to own. It costs us money to bring on new people." So we
Mm.
had a production validation schedule, and he said, if people leave and they haven't validated the draw that we're giving them or the salary, then you're going to pay half of it, and I'll pay half of it, Harvey said.
Ah.
So I ran the numbers. Uh, I ran the numbers and created this Excel spreadsheet with a report. Uh, and
See, there's a little bit of inner nerd in you.
oh,
You. Whenever I get my spreadsheets out, Philip's always like, you're down in the numbers too much. That's why we get along, Simonson.
exactly. And now I got to say, Mike created this and one of my regional directors, but I took it and I started, took it to another level where made the connections between behaviors and activities to drive the actual results. It drives the scorecard.
It's
So
amazing, isn't it?
it is. So it's my first meeting amongst the divisional managers. So and Choate's the regional vice president. I'm, and I just go through and I hand out everyone's report. And I said, okay. If nothing changes over the next 12 months, here's what you're going to make in regard to bonus, and here's what you're going to have to pay back based on the failures.
I bet a few eyes opened.
Oh, Bump looks at it. He owes 125 grand. Now, Bump's been
Wow.
around. Bump is a great guy, and he's been around for 30 some odd years. He's got deep pockets. He can afford it. And he said, okay, I've got
But
my,
this is also 1987,
yeah.
1988 money, so we're talking close to $500,000.
Oh, yeah. And I'm talking to it. Then I got another 35-year-old. He owes like 60, 70 grand. Well, within a month, I'm down there stepping him down, and he's anyway. So Bump just says, you know what? I think I'm going to invite Philip down immediately to help me figure this thing out. I will learn my lessons. I will survive, but you got my attention. So instead of getting in, you got to define that current reality in a non-obscure way. And we took it to, like I said, number one. And now, we go over to England, and I wanted to have so there was a turnaround. And now I want to go, and we put in I wanted to go to have England to have experience with the startup. And I initially applied for it, got turned down because I wasn't more strategic. I am an implementer and a field person. So after, they're just getting ready to launch, they hired those 8 divisional managers. Now, remember, we've said this before, to run a successful business, you must manage 3 things well. One is net income. 2 is you got to manage processes. And 3, you've got to manage and lead people, right? So, what did I, in England, it was a company called Acuma. We ended up selling it at the end. So there was, my learnings when I first got over there, and I told this story before with John Crew. Oh, John walked in the room. He had presence. He was a Brit. He was the head of sales. And John was the one who told me to go around, meet the 8th division, vice presidents, report back in a week. And what did you learn? Well, that was one of my defining current realities. And remember, I said, all right, let's take net income and let's manage people's expectations. It's a startup. And I asked John, I asked every one of those divisional managers, okay, palatial offices, you've got a lot of empty seats here. You've got people in orientation, in how many people do you have to hire, and what's their production level, and what's your retention rate, and and how premium households do you have in this area at a 2 to 4% penetration rate on mailings to drive you quality leads to make sure these people achieve it, so that you eventually know you're profitable. What's it going to take? They all just looked at me. They didn't have any answer to that. And it was kind of like, okay. And then there were some other things. So right there, one of the first lessons, what I learned there was it's better to grow out of something than into something. All right. Now,
Absolutely.
right. And so Jeff comes back over. He was like 2 years in, and we're not making money. Now, there's a few other timing is also important. I got there in 90. You can go back and look in the history books here. Uh, we hit a recession. And that was another key learning that, typical recessions, you're historically it's now today everyone hears about it because of the pandemic, and we had the 2008 crisis, and right. But it's like a V. You're in and out in about 18 or 24 months. Well, when you go into a recession, what does our Federal Reserve do? Lowers interest rates. So our small business owners, which make up like 70%. Now, I am just, I don't know the hard number there, so someone can do the research. But overall, 250 employees or less, 70% come from small business owners. So we're gonna lower the interest rate so it's cheaper to borrow money so they can take more risks and they can expand and grow the economy, right? And we'll grow out of this thing.
Right. People use the analogy of a gas pedal, right?
Yeah,
That when you're lowering interest rates, you're pressing on the gas, and
great
then when you're
analogy.
raising, you're taking your foot off the gas.
Yep. So when we hit over there, one of the things that's great about this country, the US, and Britain, excuse me, has gotten, they've grown this piece of their population, is that um, we had a middle income and we had a lot of small business owners. They didn't have that over there. So when they go into a recession, you can lower interest rates, but it takes a lot longer to get things going.
Right.
And we sat in a recession for 4 years over there. That's tough. And the difference between a recession and a depression is a recession when your neighbor's out of work. It's a depression when you're out of work. And
Right.
so, it was tough and we kept trying to grow into something. We kept expanding. And that's why, and then boy, you better have a good economy to go with that expansion so you can, grow out of something quickly and get the revenue going versus again, it's, excuse me, that's growing into something versus growing out of something. Don't move and expand until you've got great net income and things are working in deep pockets.
Wait, that's a really great point. I've been involved in a few startups over the years, and that seems to be one of the biggest primary mistakes is that they get locked in on this vision of what it's going to be at the end. And even if you start with good intentions of trying to grow into that, it just tends to get locked in on that vision. And all of a sudden, you're building things that you're not going to need for 5 or 10 years. It's actually one of the eye-opening discussions I had with an actuary when I was working for an insurance company.
Mhm.
I was talking to one of them about this was a one of the first living benefit income riders on a variable annuity product, and we're kind of discussing the mechanics of it because I was training people on it. And I said, well, what's the actual operational way that it pays out at the end? And he's like, I don't have any idea. And I said, what do you mean you don't have any idea? We're selling these products. He's like, yeah, but you can't turn on the income for 20 years. So why would I build it now? And it was one of the things that just like was a revelation to me because I am very much that, as you know, that detailed
Right.
person that says, no, I want to know in 20 years, what's this going to look? He said, first of all, who cares? Second of all, things are going to be so totally different then that we don't have any idea how we're going to actually pay. So you're going to build something just to rebuild it 20 years later. And I thought that for me was just one of those moments that always stuck with me. And yeah, it's startups do that. They get locked in on this is our end goal, and they end up, even with best intentions, building out further than they really
Right.
need to.
Yeah, and so let's remember the three things: net income. I'm going to come back to net income one last point, but I'm going to segue. I'm jumping now, as you know I can do. I'm going to go to managing people and in leading people and this concept of growing. It's better to grow out of something into something. Now we went with hey, we're going to grow into something when they kept expanding. Went, when I got there it was 8 and we went to 16 divisions, and because that's what the business plan said, and yada yada yada. But the issue and what we also had as this is another learning kind of guiding principle, or that we wanted to promote from within. Now the issue with that, and all of a sudden you went from eight divisions to 16 divisions. We took our best district managers and made them divisional managers, which requires a new skill set.
Right.
And then when we take those district managers who, we had training managers, we moved that created an opening, and then from there we made the training managers, successful training managers, into district managers. Well, it's a great for morale, But boy, we got a lot of people who don't know what they don't know
It's a
at the new
mastery
task,
issue.
the mastery task. So there's the processes, and we didn't have the right systems in place to create consistency and predictability and leverage. So I'll go back to those processes. So that was, you got to make, don't, I'm going to, I'll go back up. So, Jeff comes over and, he had a big powwow with, I was in the, I was running a region over there, and uh, he was, anyway, he and I just meet up at the end of the day. He was meeting with the senior executive team. I was out in the field, um, and he met with the board, and we met at a pub. And he goes, "Okay, Philip, what's going on here?" And I said, "Well, I don't know who signed off on this thing, but that 3-year business plan, I've never been a part of anything where you have great growth and then there's a pullback, right? This thing just kept going straight up, and there's
So the,
never
the plan did. The plan
yeah,
only took into account straight up growth.
up growth. You know how you usually see the mountain chart going from left
Yeah,
to right?
right.
Not here. It was straight up, and I said, that ain't reality here. We're I've shared that you know, growing from within is it's a nice feel good and great story and great for recruiting, but we're up, you know, and he says, stop. First of all, Jeff was the, Harvard grad, Wharton School of Business, MBA, great leader. We're all perfectly imperfect, and I loved it. But he said, Philip, I'm that idiot. I'm the one who signed off on it. I go, oh, stick your foot in the mouth. He says, what else? I said, well, and what you also tell me, it's leadership. And he said, all right, and I learned a lot from him. He said, look, no leadership is better than poor leadership. And of course, that's all right. There's a twister. That's going to make me think. Well, I said, well, I'm not going to. Jeff, what do you mean by that? Tell me more. You can never go wrong with that. Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more. It's a great way to keep it going, right? He says, well, think about it. No leadership is better than poor leadership. And we had some poor leadership at the top. They were they were afraid of going back to New York. They were, giving false information on the financials. I found out
Oh wow.
it was not good. And New York was in a tough time. Harvey just left IDS to take over American Express. That stock went, it was like at $12. So eventually, they had to stop the bleeding, and we sold the company. But what Jeff said, look, no leadership is better than poor leadership. And I said, when I asked him what's that mean, and tell me more, he says, well, think about it. Most people are self-motivated, particularly salespeople. I've always found I don't have to ask the sales. If, I can set the goals, for the company. But if I found that with salespeople, if I ask them what they want for themselves, they're going to want more than what I want for them. Now, then what I have to do is get the right people in place to help me manage their behaviors again. So they defining current reality, they're going to want more than, and they're going to overassess their readiness. They think they're better at what they're actually doing, and they can actually achieve it. But he said they'll want more than what I want for them. Now, but poor leadership, particularly with the salespeople, one of the first jobs he also said of a sales leader is to take away the salesperson's irritants. So, in poor leadership is creating irritants. So when they wake up, instead of focusing on what they have to do that day to make money, they're saying, "Oh, okay, how can I go screw Simonson today? Because he's an idiot." And I go, "Yeah, that's right. I get it." So, you're managing leading people. The piece I'll say on that, what we learned there was, don't confuse potential with ability as well. Now, for someone to be high in ability, they gotta have I define readiness. It's situation leadership. I'd say probably out of the top Fortune 100 companies, you know, 80 to 90% I've heard is put together by Kilty, Goldsmith, and Boone, the situation leader, have taken their people through this, their leaders. And it's teaching you how to assess your person, your follower's readiness level. And I don't say follower in a negative manner. There's the follower, there's the leader. And underneath readiness, you look at ability and motivation. And underneath ability, there's the acronym for someone to be high in ability. They use the acronym TRUE. Have they been trained on the task before? Do they role perception? Do they accept the task as part of their job? Leader owns role perception. Best time to control role perception is in the selection process. Defining, here's what you got, I expect you to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then have you had, and then it's, do you know what to say and how to say it? And then E, recent, relevant, successful experience. Now, if any one of those four components are missing, then the likelihood of that follower completing the task successfully will be low.
That one I remembered.
Do you remember
Recent
that? Yeah.
relevant experience.
Yes, that's the operative words. Recent, relevant, successful. And it's okay, you share that language. And Harvey taught us this language, because he was the director of McKinsey and Company of business development and learning, I believe. I could have it wrong. But, when he took over Amex IDS, when he found the company for Sandy Weil, who was running Amex at the time, he found IDS. He just gave us all this situational leadership.
Now that should be a standalone episode on its own. We definitely need to come back to the leadership model and go through that just as a standalone episode, because that is something that has been also another foundational piece of what you have taught me over the years in management. And I'll jump in here and just make a couple of comments on notes on things that you've mentioned. That concept of the sole proprietor versus working within a corporation. One thing I will say there is, don't be surprised if you're early on in your career and you think, like, I always thought that I was destined for corporate life. Like, I wanted that when I was young. I grew up in a military family. Mm-hmm. I liked the feeling of being part of a group and knowing, hey, this is where everything is. There's the hierarchy. Here's where you sit. Here's all these other people around you. You know what they do. And it felt very safe to me as a kid. And so when I came out into the world, in the working world, I thought that's what I wanted to do, that I wanted to get into corporate management. And the point I make there is, don't be surprised if at some point in your life you realize that what you thought isn't actually what you end up wanting. I'm now as far away from that as I could possibly be, right? Running our own business, completely freelance. And the question that I keep asking myself now is, why didn't I do this sooner? Now, wholesaling, for all intents and purposes, is essentially kind of a franchise, right? You're in a big corporation. And I always said this while I was doing it, that you're kind of you get the best of both worlds, right? I got to be part of a big organization, but you're essentially a sole proprietor within a bigger organization. You have a bunch of resources and you've got the company name, but on a day-to-day basis, you're out there running your own thing. So I did find a niche where I could be my best self within a corporation. But the reality is, and you've put this on the spot time and time again, I don't suffer fools gladly. I speak too much truth to power. I don't know when to keep my mouth shut. I have a really hard time playing the political game, and I'm just not built for the corporate world. And so, but this has been a 20-year process for me. So my point is, as you go through your career, don't be surprised if you end up doing something. Like, if you told me 20 years ago that I'd be running my own business completely on my own with no safety net, I would have laughed at you and said, no, there's no way. Never. Right. I would never do that. And then, in fact, I've also said it couple of times, I think, on the podcast that had the pandemic not come along, I may have already run off and gotten an employee job. And so it has, pushed me a little bit further out of my comfort zone. And now I just think always be open to the fact that you might be wrong about what you
Yeah,
think
right.
is my overarching point there. And then you said one thing that just jumped out at me in the story, which was, we did it because that's what the business plan said.
Oh,
If
yes.
that ain't the dumbest phrase ever spoken in business.
Well, we soon learned to start setting up quarterly periodic business reviews after that.
Yep.
And that's exactly right. And one of the things we learned there from said, hey, if we're applying these resources to achieve X, and if we're not getting it, should we? We said periodic business review. Or think of them as toll gates, on the roads. You stop to reflect and grab your key learnings and what's working well and why is it working well and how can that be leveraged across the organization. What's the one or two things we need to start doing to keep revenue going or reduce expenses, and what's the one or two things we must stop doing. Those are great questions of if running a big business, small business, or your mom and pop.
Right.
Have those sessions. Things change, as you're saying.
Certainly. Well, we are running up on just over 45 minutes. So awesome experiences and great to revisit that. As usual, we jump into a topic and say, oh man, this might not go long enough for the episode, and we end up bumping up against the end of our main section with
There we go.
plenty of stuff to talk about. So I want to thank you for sharing all of that. I've always enjoyed over the years hearing those stories and sharing that fact that we both lived in England at different times during our lives, and also the fact that you had so many great learning experiences out of it is a great fit for this episode. So let's transition on to our article for the week. And this also incredibly personal for both of us. And it is titled 3 Ways Sobriety Made Me a Better Advisor. And I will just share the bullet points of the 3 things that this advisor shared with his quitting drinking. Number 1, our common welfare should come first. Success depends on unity. Number 2, what other people think of you is none of your business. And then 3, take it one day at a time. These are the 3 bullet points of what he learned as he came to be sober while running what was already a successful financial services practice. And that's the first point that I personally want to make. So my story is a little different. I was addicted to OxyContin pills for 7 years. I got sober in October of 2007. I've had 2 relapses, both in 2008, and have been fully sober since then. But as you and I have talked about, the substance doesn't matter. It's the experience of the addiction that is the same, even though details may differ. And the first thing that jumped out at me was the running a successful business while being addicted, because many of us do that. Like, we're not all, and this is one of the things that actually kept me from finding sobriety at first, was I went to a couple of meetings for various organizations, and all of the stories I heard were, I ended up sleeping on the garage floor of my, brother's, second house. And like, they were all these like complete stories of complete collapse. And I just had a really hard time identifying it because I was still functioning. I was fully functioning. And in fact, it was a fairly successful portion of my career. Now, I could have been much more successful probably had I not been addicted, but it was really hard for me to connect to the stories that I was hearing, and that was the first thing that really leapt out at me in this story. And I think it's true of many people in financial services that they are functional addicts. We
Oh,
see them that
absolutely.
you are high functioning and still being successful while dealing with this addiction, while hiding this addiction. But
They'll leave a wake, though. They'll
you
leave a
do
wake behind them.
you do leave awake, and you also see with these three things that it does affect everything, right? He's pointing to his interpersonal relationships
Mhm.
with the people that are important to him. The second point, what other people think of you is none of your business, it's affecting his the way people are viewing him. So not even his personal relationships, just his non-personal relationships are being affected. And then lastly, taking it one day at a time, it's affecting you individually. So it infects and impacts every part of your life. And it is one of the things that most people as they go into sobriety talk about is kind of the scales falling off your eyes and just seeing for the first time all of the things that have were affected and all of the people that were seeing you and seeing what was going on. One of the last stories I'll tell, and I'll pass it over to
Mhm.
you. When I first started wholesaling, I got sent down to St. Louis to travel with my very good friend Tom Scott, who's now with MFS, and I I was getting high all the time. I was ducking into bathrooms and getting high and finding places to disappear to. And years later, Tom happened to mention to me at a meeting, he said, "Yeah, when you came down to visit with me and training with me," he's like, "I just had no idea what was wrong with this guy. Like, he was in the bathroom all the time." He's like, "I just couldn't figure out what you were doing. Like, did you have some kind of intestinal tract issue?" Or I'm like, "No, man, I was higher than a kite is what was going on." So I'll pass it over to you. You've had, I'll let you
Uh,
share your experience and
no,
your
thank you for
thoughts.
sharing yours. And, I think wow, I was just reading 1 out of 7, 1 out of 8 people in this country are dealing with some form of addiction. It might even be higher than that. Um, so it impacts all of us. And, for me, it's, shake my family tree. You've heard me say this before. A bunch of CIAs, fall out Catholic Irish alcoholics, or you can take, I'm also the Irish Norwegian. Uh, you live in a place where there's no sun. There's a high percentage of alcoholism up there in Scandinavian countries. But my point with this thing, it is a disease, first and foremost. And you know, what he says, our common welfare should come first. Success depends on unity. On that one, as a disease, I call it the me disease because it's all about me. It's cunning, baffling, powerful disease. And what I learned, because it's close to home, I got and I went 10 years to Al-Anon and faithfully, and these 12 steps, I call them life steps. Uh, Personally, it's the tools I obtained just about self-awareness skills. If I would have had them at age, starting off when in my business career, I don't know where I would have ended up.
It really is true, right?
Oh,
These are human life lessons as much
yes.
as they are lessons about learning to deal with addiction.
Yeah. So,
It's just the manner in which he learned them happened to be fighting his addiction.
yeah, exactly. And if you're practicing those life steps or, 12 steps, it's, if someone's getting sober just with this guy, the gentleman Scott, I mean, not Scott, that's his co-founder, Scott Mitchell, he writes about, but our common welfare should come first. Success depends on unity. It's, you'll know it's all about self-honesty. It's not about me anymore. And I love that he says here, what other people think of you is none of your business. I love his, I think it's in there someplace. Yeah, in the first one, our common welfare should come first. Ray Kroc's quote, none of us are as good as all of us. Now, if you got the disease, it's all about me. If you really are getting sober, no, it's about unity. It's not about self promotion anymore. It is it's being completely self honest.
The bottom line for this for me was realizing that towards the end it didn't start out this way, but towards the end I was taking pain medication from my mother.
Yes. Then right?
So imagine that, like, to feed your addiction, uh, you're letting your mother be in pain. Like, that was the one that when that clicked for me, I was like, uh, ugh, just
Yep.
there's no more me than that.
That's right. And then we feel badly about ourselves, and it's a never, and then we got to numb that pain. So, I liked his too. Take it one day at a time. And that couldn't be more relevant to today. We've always, Dan, you and I've said, this one day at a time, and then we're in the financial planning industry. Well, the way I look at this and make that connection is a couple things. One, you live for today, but you plan for tomorrow. Two, this COVID, today, 2008, in 2008, when we had that crisis, it was pretty much the stock market was the issue. Today with COVID, it's just not the stock market. People in today's environment, they've got a high stress. It's just you got the COVID going on. There's a lot of can't a lot of places for a while there you couldn't go out to eat. You can't go to movies. You can't do the
Kids
large.
are at home.
Kids are at home. You got to also educate those children. The self isolation that's taking place, so you have, for some, it's loss of jobs.
Right.
So, right. So this comes back to the three bucket theory. And I don't know if I've shared this before, but I learned this from another great mentor of mine, Doug Lennox, um, and the three bucket theory. Bucket one are things that we can control, and the things that you can control, that's your behaviors, because you can't control uh, what's going to happen to you, but you can control how you're going to respond to what happens to you, and you can't control other people and other systems. You can control your behavior and your thoughts. Now, and then bucket two are things that you can influence, and bucket three are things that you have neither control nor influence over. So, bucket two are things that, what are things that you can influence? Certainly you can influence your choice around your health. You can make better decisions, particularly in this times of crisis now. Things that you're eating, making sure you're getting exercises. I'm going to get an extra 15 minutes of sleep in the evening, in the night, and and go to bed early. And 15 minutes, I'll get up later. Get good sleep.
You
So
can at time influence others too, right? But not you certainly can't control them.
you
And
can't
there are
control them.
times
No.
where they do fall into bucket three.
Yeah, and the way you can influence others too, if is the best way to influence up, if you're trying to lead up and get change to occur, is if you got permission to speak for others in your team or group, and they've designated you as the sole person. Then that person you're leading up to has to listen closer to what's going on versus it's just one person bitching.
Right.
And but then the things that you have neither control nor influence over, you and I aren't going to control the stock market. You and I aren't going to control this COVID. You and I, there's things that I got to just ask myself, do I really have any control over it? If not, let it go. Stay focused on your bucket one items.
I have a friend that is constantly, because he knows I'm in financial services, is What do you think of this stock? Do you think I should sell this stock? Do you think I should buy this stock? My dad used to do this to me. I tell the story. He's always, oh, should I? It was Verizon back in the day, in the late 90s. Should I buy Verizon stock? Should I buy Verizon stock? Finally, I was like, Dad, you know what? You should really just buy one of these annuity products. I used to always tell this story when I was selling annuities. Because you get stock market participation and it's got a guarantee with it. And he literally bought it and then stopped talking to me about stocks. Never talked to me about stocks ever again. And I was like, oh, it's the greatest recommendation I've ever made. I know you're not supposed many times say don't make recommendations to your own family. It's like, Dad,
Yeah.
you got to get off my case. But it's true. I'm like, it doesn't matter to me whether Tesla's up or down tomorrow. That's not the way that I say it to my friend all the time. I'm like, I just don't follow these things. They don't impact me. I actually have an advisor that does that for me. Is what I tell him.
Well, there, in the bucket 3, the market. Here's what I remember a financial analyst from large, let's say Fortune 100 company said, look, he says, when you have proof, you don't have price. And when you have the price, you don't have the proof. Right?
It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle for stocks.
Yeah. and there's a study that shows, in regard, 87% of a portfolio's growth comes down to what you and I've talked about throughout this whole thing, is saving and investing behavior. The other 13 is asset allocation, timing, individual shares, etc. So it's about the staying disciplined and staying with the time. And interesting thing, and it's, it'll be something, maybe another topic. And I'll leave with this, again, take one day at a time. But boy, decision makings, as I started this off, 35,000 decision makings we have each and every day. On average, we make. Just make one or two better. But first, don't make decisions when you are in a high negative emotional state. First thought is generally wrong. And 40% of the people, Fidelity gave a study, are over 65, Dan. 40% of the people over 65 sold out of the market and back in March. Now, wonder what they're thinking today. Don't know, but boy, I don't want to stay, I'm thinking if you've got the long term, go back to, here's my last part. Go back and listen to our smart money philosophy around the 4 cornerstones.
When you say make long-term decisions over, deliberately, and quick decisions can be made. Short-term decisions can be made quickly.
Reversible decisions reversible decisions quickly, irreversible decisions slowly.
There you go. Right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for this week. If you have topics or questions that you would like us to cover in an upcoming podcast, reach out to us via email, info@value-ability.com. Again, that's info@value-ability.com, or touch base with us via social media. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook links are at value-ability.com. Click on the Contact Us tab, and all of those links are there. Wherever you find us, the mantra, like, review, subscribe, and share. Next episode, not quite sure whether we are going to get Income Lab rescheduled for the next episode or not, so stay tuned. We will be back for episode 32. Seriously, somebody send us a question. I am going to throw out there, the first person to send us in 2 questions, Valuability will purchase for them a business personal development book. So a free giveaway, 2 questions that we use on air. They've got to be good questions. It can't be, what's Dan's favorite color. Good topic-focused questions, and you will get a free book. So send us some questions. I'm going straight to the pocketbook, as Philip said. A way to change people's
behavior.
People's behaviors.
Well, we're giving it away. We're not, but they might. You might.
Philip doesn't like this because he's a cheap Norwegian, but.
Manage net income. I didn't get the processes, on that Acuma experience. That's for another time, but managing net income.
I should say thrifty Norwegian. I'm sorry, all my Scandinavian.
That's okay.
So, as always, thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us next week. And remember that financial success comes from building a plan on the foundation of your values, and building your ability will help you get there. This is a podcast collaboration, not a peer-reviewed journal or a sponsored publication. We make no representations as to accuracy, completeness, correctness, suitability, or validity of any information in this podcast, and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information, or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. It is the listener's responsibility to verify their own facts. You should be aware of the real risk of loss in following any strategy or investment discussed on this podcast. Strategies or investments discussed may fluctuate in price or value. Investors may get back less than invested. Investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast may not be suitable for you. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You must make an independent decision regarding investments or strategies mentioned on this podcast. Before acting on information on this podcast, you should consider whether it is suitable for your particular circumstances and strongly consider seeking advice from your own financial or investment advisor. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, organization, employer, or company. Assumptions are not reflective of the position of any entity other than the authors, and since we are critically thinking human beings, these views are always subject to change, revision, and rethinking at any time. Please do not hold us to them in perpetuity.